Well, it's been a busy week in Washington with farewell addresses from the outgoing administration and confirmation hearings for President-elect Donald Trump's cabinet picks. Also in the mix over the last 24 hours has been the announcement of a ceasefire hostage deal between Israel and Hamas. However, it appears the announcement, as I mentioned earlier, was premature, and that may have been by design. Joining me now is Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, who serves on 4 Senate committees, including the Select Committee on Intelligence and the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs. He is also the vice chair of the Senate Republican Conference. Senator Lankford, welcome back to Washington Watch. Happy New Year. Good to see you.
Thanks, Tony. It's always good to see you as well. Thanks for the work you're doing.
Well, thank you. Let me first get your take on the news we're hearing out of Israel and this hostage and ceasefire deal.
Yeah, very, very challenging. Obviously, we're all praying for peace. We're all praying for the return of these hostages. But when you're dealing with a terrorist organization like Hamas, it's not exactly a good actor here. They've been holding now 98 people that are there that they've been holding now for more than a year. Some of those more even predate October the 7th. I spent about 2 hours last night with a group of folks, including the Israeli ambassador, talking through all these issues, trying to be able to determine kind of next steps in this. The key issue right now is the deal that was made has a lot of ambiguity into it, and Hamas is using that to say we're not really going to do it the way that you think we're going to do it. It is also 33 hostages, and they still have to have an agreement on those living hostages or those that have already passed away while they're in captivity. Obviously, the Israelis want the living hostages to be able to come out first, and Hamas seems to be hedging on that. So there's a lot of issues still to be able to be resolved.
Yeah, and I think, and one of the issues that really put the brakes on this is that the ratio of exchange, there's going to be an exchange of hostages for terrorists, and I'm reportedly, it's what I'm told is it's about 50-1. And Israel wanted to be able to determine who that was, but that apparently was something that Hamas did not want. They wanted to pick who was going to be released. So this thing appears to be on very thin ice at present.
It is, actually. This is the deal they've been working on since May. And what's interesting is the Trump administration, the new leadership that would come in from the national security and for Middle East peace and the envoy, they've been very engaged in this process along with the Biden team. So the Biden team literally allowed the Trump team to be able to join in, help negotiate this. But that allowed both Trump and Biden team to be able to say to Hamas, this is the American position on it. And so Hamas couldn't play off on one administration to the other. So we're doing what it takes and what we need to be able to do to help bring some things together on it. Hamas, though, again, it's a terrorist organization, and they're always going to look for ways that they can gain leverage to be able to go back and kill more people simply because they're Jewish.
Was this being rushed through to try to get something done so Biden could claim credit for it, and the ink wasn't even dry, so the T's weren't crossed, the I's weren't dotted?
Actually, this is the framework that actually Biden and his team actually started working since May to be able to pull together. The rush is actually just to get hostages out. All the families are obviously very eager for loved ones to be able to get out of captivity of a group of terrorists there. We have no idea how they're being treated, but it's probably not good.
Right.
And so the push is, let's get this done as fast as we can. The Israeli people are very ready to have their people home.
Yeah, I was with a former hostage, one who was released about 30 days into it in the first release, and her husband is still being held captive, and she described the conditions. And yes, they are very eager, and we continue to pray for that and want to see that happen. But we also understand Israel's underlying need to ensure their security and safety going forward by the elimination of this terrorist entity, Hamas, that is right there on their border.
Yeah, Tony, you know it extremely well. The Israeli people, many of them had developed a trust relationship with some of these Palestinian families that they had been around. And then on October the 7th of last year, some of those individuals that literally they had partnered with and helped and worked alongside in Israel and knew their family, then came in and led some of the terrorists right into their homes to be able to slaughter their families. So trust is shattered in Israel,
right,
where they tried to reach out and develop peaceful relationships with their neighbors, and those neighbors then came and killed them for it.
Yeah, and I know your credentials on Israel, a solid Israel supporter. You and I went to Israel 12, 13 years ago together on a trip and working in Judea and Samaria. Let me switch gears here, Senator. I want to turn to the Senate hearings for President President-elect Trump's cabinet. We've had several so far, including, I think, 4 today. Hearings have not yet been scheduled for all of President Trump's choices, including some of the most contentious among them, being Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for Health and Human Services Department. And I think you've had a chance to visit with him, if I'm not mistaken. I want to get your thoughts.
I have. I had the opportunity to sit down with him in December. I was one of the early folks. I serve on that committee, the finance committee, that will do the hearing, and we are waiting for that hearing to be set still. There's some paperwork and things that have not been submitted, and so obviously we want to get that done. That's an FBI background check. That's the ethics report. Those are just things that every single nominee goes through every single time. So we've got to be able to have that before we can actually schedule the actual hearings to be able to get it done. He and I talked on a lot of different issues on food and other things, but I spent a lot of my time talking about the life issues. And he was pretty clear with me. And his family, he's got members of his family that are on every single position on the issue about abortion. But he also said in his personal belief, he is not as pro-life as I am or you are, but he said his personal belief is America has way too many abortions. It's embarrassing on the world stage what is happening, and we need to reduce the number of abortions in America. And he was committed to taking us back to the HHS policy of the first Trump administration, which was a very pro-life HHS. And my request to him was not just that, but also undo what President Biden did, because President Biden has used HHS to increase the number of abortions in America. That needs to be undone as well.
Yeah, in fact, front and center on that discussion is the FDA and the sending of the abortion pill via the mail, which is both a DOJ and a FDA issue. But that's now somewhere's possibly 70% of abortions being performed by that. So a pro-life state that has a pro-life law, it means nothing if the federal government is allowing these abortion pills to be sent through the mail.
It is actually. I asked him about that directly on it, and I said one of the issues is the FDA has used their political power to not have good science on this. They're using it for political purposes. They're literally telling hospitals if women have side effects, if they come in with severe bleeding, if they have all kinds of issues related to the use of these chemical abortion pills, don't report it unless she dies. So literally, FDA is using their power to suppress all of the bad information about these drugs. He immediately responded and said, that's just the kind of issue that I want to be able to expose, where the big pharma companies are using their power, or there's a political basis to be able to not get the American people the information. So he was pretty clear about that, but we've got a long way to go. Well, on the issue of life.
I mean, given his distrust for big pharma, and I would think just allowing the facts to come out there, that's all we want. We just want the truth, because the truth will speak very clearly on this issue. But I want to go back just for clarity, because I would agree with you that I think the starting place is back to where the Trump Department of Health and Human Services was in 2020 when he left office, because it was actually in a very good place. We had seen extremely good policy coming out. Is that the commitment that you have from Mr. Kennedy?
That was my understanding on that. He also said that he and the president had talked about this, and that President Trump had said, I am pro-life. We're going to have a pro-life HHS on it. I said, that's terrific. I'm following up with the president to be able to clarify that and to make sure that conversation, I hear both sides of that conversation. But for me, that's baseline. We need to at least have the policies that were in President Trump's first administration, HHS, and in the State Department, because as you know, there's many different grants that are done to promote abortion and provide abortion worldwide with Biden's State Department. Those need to be turned off. And so that my tax dollars from taxpayers in Oklahoma are being used to take human life.
Yeah, that would be a huge step forward, just going back to where we were 4 years ago. Now, speaking of the life issue, the Senate is expected to vote next week on the Born Alive Survivors Protection Act. What do you expect when that hits the Senate floor next week?
Yeah, I would expect to bring that up. That's my bill, along with Jim Banks, that we're actually bringing that bill forward to be able to protect children. If there's a botched abortion and a child's actually born alive, there should be basic American decency and values that child is then protected. They're not in a womb. They're fully delivered at that point. That's a child everyone's looking at. We need to protect the value of that child there. That's coming in front of the Senate. I have no expectation, quite frankly, right now, that my Democratic colleagues will vote any different than they did last year. We feel it's very important to be able to continue to bring this, as we did with partial birth abortion decades ago.
Right.
The Congress brought it up multiple times before they could actually get that settled in law. We believe we're going to continue to bring this up until we get this settled, until every American sees a child fully born We should not have an argument about this, whether that child is actually a child in front of you.
Well, the difference is that you can actually bring it up and have a vote on it and have a debate about it. You couldn't do that in the under Chuck Schumer when he was the leader.
Yep, that's correct, and that is one of the powers of being in the majority, that we get to drive what actually comes to the floor. And Leader Thune agreed immediately to be able to bring this up. As you know, he and I were the co-sponsors of this in the last session. Leader Thune has been very pro-life, and he's very focused on trying to be able to get this up so we can make some progress.
We just got about 45 seconds left, but next week you're going to be introducing some measures for the Department of Government and Efficiency to get that rolling. What should we be looking for?
So there's several things we're pulling together. This is something I've worked on for years, actually. I release every year a book we call Federal Fumbles. It's just areas of waste and overreach in the federal government. We'll pull some of these things out, and there'll be a series of different bills that we'll release. This one in particular deals with things like telework, how we do our record keeping, engagement of individuals in the process of actually forming a regulation. If I can say it this way, Tony, it's kind of the nerdy stuff behind the scenes. We all see the grant that's put out there for drag shows in Ecuador that Americans paid for. We see that and we highlight it, but I am asking the question, how did it happen?
Yeah.
How do we fix it before it ever starts?
All right, we want to talk with you about that when that comes up. And so, Senator, thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you real soon.